In a world where power and prejudice often collide, one encounter is about to change everything. A racist police officer, blinded by his own biases, targets a black FBI agent who's determined to stand her ground. What begins as a routine interaction quickly escalates into an explosive confrontation. With emotions running high and tensions rising, this isn't just a battle of authority, it's a clash of values, courage, and justice. The officer, fueled by hate, doesn't know who he's up against. The FBI agent, calm yet relentless, is about to show him just how wrong he is. As the two lock eyes, the air thickens with a kind of tension that could explode at any moment. Will the agent get the upper hand, or will the officer's aggressions spiral out of control? You won't believe what happens next. Stay tuned. The FBI agent, Special Agent Maria Lawson, had seen her fair share of injustice. She didn't back down easily, especially when it came to defending what was right. But today, she was facing something different, a system that was supposed to protect people, yet failed to see beyond the color of skin. Officer Daniels, a veteran on the force, had built a reputation for his hardline tactics, but beneath the badge, his biases were obvious. When they crossed paths at the scene of a local investigation, sparks flew. Daniels didn't like the idea of a black woman stepping in to take charge. His voice dripped with contempt as he tried to assert control, but Lawson wasn't backing down. With every word exchanged, the tension thickened, both of them holding their ground in a battle neither expected to escalate this far. What was supposed to be a simple standoff had now turned into a test of power and integrity. As Lawson stood her ground, she could feel the weight of history pressing down on the moment. She was no stranger to the challenges of being a black woman in a profession dominated by white men, but this felt different. Officer Daniels wasn't just resistant to her authority. He was actively undermining her, making snide remarks about her presence on the case. Every word he spat was laced with years of ingrained prejudice, and it was clear he didn't believe someone like her should be in charge. His arrogance was almost palpable, and as she glanced around, she could feel the eyes of others on them, some watching in silence, others clearly uncomfortable with the growing tension. Meanwhile, Daniel's frustration began to boil over. He had built a career based on toughness, on making people bend to his will. The idea that a woman, and a black one at that, was questioning his authority cut deeper than he let on. His bravado was masking something darker, a deep-rooted insecurity he had carried for years. His fists clenched at his sides, and his voice dropped dangerously low. Lawson remained calm, though, her years of experience teaching her not to give in to provocation. But the longer the standoff continued, the more she realized the stakes had shifted. This wasn't just about one officer's personal bias, it was a clash of ideologies. Daniels was a product of a broken system, one that had taught him to see the world through a narrow lens. Lawson, on the other hand, was fighting for a change that went deeper than any individual. As their exchange escalated, Lawson's mind raced. How far was Daniels willing to go to maintain his dominance? And how far could she push before everything boiled over? In the background, an unsettling noise grew louder, a sign that the tension was drawing attention from people who had no idea what was truly at stake. The seconds felt like minutes as the tension between Lawson and Daniels reached a breaking point. The crowd around them had grown, their murmurs becoming louder, as if they too sensed the impending eruption. Lawson's heart pounded, not from fear, but from the sheer weight of the situation. She had seen it before, an officer like Daniels, believing his badge gave him power over everyone. She couldn't back down now. But there was a cost to standing firm, especially when the odds were stacked against her. Daniel's face twisted in frustration, his anger becoming more visible with every passing moment. He took a step closer, invading her personal space, his breath hot with contempt. "You really think you're in charge here?" he sneered, his voice rising. The challenge in his tone was undeniable, but Lawson stood motionless, her gaze unshaken. The words hung in the air like a dare. Something snapped. With a quick motion, Daniels reached for his handcuffs, his intention clear. He was going to make her submit, no matter the consequences. But Lawson was ready. She had spent years navigating these exact situations, knowing that her every move could be misinterpreted, her every action scrutinized. The decision she was about to make would change everything. Around them, the air seemed to thicken, the weight of the moment pressing in. The crowd was now watching intently, some with phones already recording, sensing the volatility of what was unfolding. Lawson could feel her own muscles tensing, a deep breath filling her chest. Her instincts screamed at her to act, but there was no room for mistakes. One wrong move, and everything could spiral out of control. Just as Daniels made his move, a voice broke through the chaos. It was a voice that seemed out of place in the madness. A calm, steady voice from someone who had seen it all. The sudden interruption was like a shot in the dark, throwing everything into question. The balance of power hung in the air, fragile and uncertain. Would the moment pass without bloodshed, or was the showdown about to reach its boiling point? The voice that interrupted the tension was sharp, authoritative, and unexpected. It came from behind them, cutting through the air like a knife. "Step back, Daniels. Now." Lawson froze, her eyes darting toward the source of the command, and for a brief moment she saw the confusion flicker across Daniels' face. His hand, which had been reaching for the cuffs, paused mid-motion. He turned slowly, his expression darkening with irritation, but the fear in his eyes was unmistakable. A figure emerged from the crowd, another officer, but this one was different. She was older, graying at the temples, and her uniform was crisp, but there was something about her presence that commanded instant respect. Special Agent Rebecca Hayes. Lawson's heart skipped. Hayes was known for being tough, no nonsense, but what was she doing here? The tension in the air doubled as the two officers locked eyes, and Hayes' steely gaze did not flinch. "Not this time," Hayes said, her voice low but full of authority. "Step away from her, Daniels." The room fell into a heavy silence, everyone waiting to see what would happen next. Daniels didn't move immediately, but the undercurrent of uncertainty was clear. Hayes was a senior agent, well respected by the Bureau, and her words carried weight. But then the unthinkable happened. Daniels' hand twitched toward his weapon, his fingers brushing the gun holstered at his side. Lawson's pulse quickened, her instincts screaming at her to act, but she couldn't make a move until she understood what was happening. What was going on? Why had Hayes intervened, and why was Daniels suddenly looking so nervous? The crowd around them seemed to hold its collective breath as the seconds stretched into what felt like an eternity. Just as the air grew thick with impending violence, Hayes spoke again, her voice colder this time. "You don't want to make this worse, Daniels. Trust me." The words hung in the air, but no one moved. It was as if time had frozen, and in that brief moment of stillness, a realization washed over Lawson. This wasn't just about one officer's bias. Something bigger was at play, something that neither Daniels nor Hayes had shared with her. The stakes were higher than she had ever imagined. She was in the middle of a game far more dangerous than she had ever prepared for, and she didn't know who to trust anymore. The silence shattered as Daniels slowly withdrew his hand from his gun, his expression a mix of frustration and defeat. Hayes stepped forward, placing herself between the two, her eyes locked on him with a finality that left no room for argument. Daniels stood there, seething, but he knew better than to challenge Hayes now. The tension in the air slowly began to dissipate as the crowd relaxed, but Lawson couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. She had confronted her own fears, stood firm in the face of injustice, but it was clear the fight wasn't over. Hayes gave Lawson a nod, her quiet support signaling a new understanding between them. Daniels may have lost this round, but the deeper issues, the systemic biases, the power struggles, remained. The scene had ended without violence, but it was a temporary victory. Lawson knew her battle for justice wasn't over, but for today she had won.